at the mouth of the Lord. So winners, as we've been looking at these snapshots, the title of the whole series is Joshua, the Portrait of a Winner. And so we've been looking at snapshots, little photos that we can hang up in our study, in our bedroom, hang on our refrigerator. Snapshots of a winner, portrait of a winner with these snapshots. And again, we come to snapshot number 9, and that is winners consult God before making important decisions. Questions for reflection. And these are some of the things that we're going to learn today as we go through this lesson. And again, you're going to hear me repeat this often today, is that next week, I'm going to do a whole Bible study as we look at deception, a whole Bible study on deception. Powerful study. Have you ever made a decision solely based on what you could see? A lot of times people look at what's before them and they make decisions on that. And so we're going to see that sometimes, watch this now, looks can be deceiving. Sometimes looks can be deceiving. And so have you ever made a decision based solely on what you could see? Samson made a decision on what he could see, right? Delilah, she was a beautiful lady. And Samson fell in love with her. And he fell in love with the whole package. He based his decision on what he could see. And that got him into trouble. So have you ever made a decision based on what you could see? Another question for reflection. Have you ever rushed into a commitment without first seeking God? Have you ever first rushed into a commitment without seeking God's direction? On the next slide, I'm going to show you some things that we need to consider when making decisions. So be ready for that. Have you ever confused common sense with God's guidance? You need to realize that there's a big difference between common sense and God's guidance. That sometimes common sense lines up with God's guidance, and sometimes it doesn't. Common sense, Joshua looked at something that was common sense. So we're going to see that in the study today. He looked at something that was common sense, but had he consulted God, he would have made a totally different decision. Had he consulted God. So something that he was looking at, which made common sense, was totally outside of God's guidance. And then have you ever looked back and realized that one prayerless decision created lasting consequences? That you made a decision that you didn't pray about, and how that had a lasting impact on your life. I've shared this many times at Bethany, but I don't know the number of people that I've talked to that was getting ready to make a major move. And I'm talking about Christians. I'm talking about members of Bethany Baptist Church. And over the years, I've asked them, did you pray about that decision? And it's amazing the response that I get from some people. They act like I'm saying something from outer space. Prayer. Prayer. Now a lot of people do say that they prayed about it, right? So I don't want to minimize those people, but it just amazes me the number of people that make decisions, based on moving, based on changing jobs, and they haven't really even prayed about it. They just saw the opportunity. So look, that goes back to question number 1. Have you made a decision based on what you could see? They saw a better job opportunity. They saw a better position, and they made the decision based on a position. So they felt that they didn't need to pray. They felt they didn't need to seek God. Here, what are some areas we must consult with God? Here's some areas that we must consult with God before accepting opportunities. Every oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Every opportunity is not a God opportunity. Every opportunity is not a God opportunity. I and let me say this, that a lot of times, as a pastor, I get a lot of uh, invitations to community, events, to sit on boards, to and I realize that these opportunities come, and some I've had to turn down, because every opportunity is not a God opportunity. And so that's why we have to, as we're going to see here. Let me read this again. Let me Joshua chapter 9 and verse 14. And the men took their provisions and asked not counsel at the mouth of the Lord. And asked not counsel at the mouth of the Lord. That they didn't see God, they didn't pray, and it got them into trouble. Before entering relationships, there's a lot of people that they don't fall in love, they fall in lust. And when they fall in lust, they just enter into the relationship without even seeking God and without seeking. I love it when people say, "Well, I'm praying about if this is the person I need to be with," because a lot of people don't. They're like Joshua. The outside looks good. It looks good from the outside, but there's no prayer. Here goes one right here. Before signing contracts. Before signing contracts. I'm having some work done on my house, and I had to find somebody that was going to do the work, and I had to sign a contract. And before I signed the contract, I thought about it and prayed about it, and the Lord gave me a peace about it. Me and my wife. My wife had some questions, and prayer that went into signing that contract. And again, you may have to have some work done on your house, and it would be a good thing if you just prayed about the person who's going to be doing the work. Because I had people do some work on my house, and I'm gonna let that go. Let me be quiet. All right. Before changing careers, have you prayed about it? When you retired, did you pray about that? I mean, again, a lot of people say, well, it was just time for me to go. And the only thing, again, the Lord might be telling you it's time to go. But I think even that is something that you should pray about. You should pray about that and have a peace from the Lord that this is what he wants you to do. Here's I'm gonna get in trouble with this one. Before making major purchases. Before making major purchases. Did you pray about that? Did you consult with God? Now, again, I'm not saying whether to go out and buy a Pepsi, 16-ounce Pepsi for $1.89. That's not what I was talking about. But if you got sugar diabetes, or if you need to lose weight, that might not be you might need to pray about that. But I'm just saying, normally that's not something that you pray about. But if it's a major purchase, have you prayed about it? You know the number one cause of marital strife and the number one cause of divorce is finances. Finances are one of the main reasons people get divorced. 50% of the people that get divorced due to, you might think that, well, maybe it was adultery or something like that. No, 50%. Most marriages that end up in divorce end up because of financial reasons. Before joining partnerships, Are you partnering with someone? So I'm not just talking about, or dating. I'm just saying even partnerships that, entering into agreement. It might look good. It look good to Joshua. It might look good to you. But are you committing that to the Lord before responding emotionally, before going off in a tizzy? Do you commit that to the Lord? Do you pray to him? And before making irreversible decisions. And this we're going to see here in our Bible study today that Joshua made an irreversible decision. He made a decision that he could not reverse. All right. So that's the introduction to our Bible study today. Yeah, I'll let you ruminate on that for a second while I take a sip of water. All right. Let's jump into the lesson. Okay, so snapshot number 9. Winners consult God before making important decisions. So this is an outline of the lesson today. The deception they encountered, the discernment they neglected, the decision they made, the discovery they experienced, the dilemma they faced, and the discipline they administered. That's where we're going today. First, let us look at, so I'm going to refer you to our notes for this. All right, let's look at our notes. And first, we want to look at the deception they encountered. The Gibeonites devised a carefully planned deception to convince Joshua that they had come from a long distance rather than from the nearby country of Canaan. Now, look at this. Look at this. They wore out their clothes. They carried patches of wineskin. They brought moldy bread, and they rehearsed a believable story to make their account appear authentic. Their deception was effective because they carefully supported their lie with visible evidence. See, and watch this now, saints. That goes back to this right here. Have you ever made decisions based solely on what you could see? And so that's what Joshua ends up doing. He ends up making a decision based on something that he could see. The deception was effective because they supported their lie with visual evidence and blended enough truth into their story to make it seem credible. Now, in the gray box, and when you see these gray boxes in your notes, when I put the gray boxes in there, that's usually some background fact that I'm trying to interject. All right. So these Gibeonites wanted Joshua to think, because they realized that, Joshua was taken over, that the Israelites were moving, and they took down Jericho, they took down Ai, and one of the cities that they was getting ready to come to was Gibeon. And so they didn't want to give in to Joshua, so they figured that they would side with Joshua. They didn't want Joshua to come in and destroy the city and destroy everybody. So they were trying to save their own skins. They were trying to save their own neck. And so they came and they said, man, we heard about God, well, let's look at that. Let me see. Look at verse 9. Look at verse 9 of Joshua chapter 9. And they said unto him, they said to Joshua, from a far country thy servants have come, because of the name of the Lord thy God. For we have heard the fame of him and all that he did in Egypt. So these Gibeonites, they said, man, we heard about the God that you serve. And, we heard about it from hundreds of miles away. Hundreds of miles away. And all that he did to the two kings of the Amorites that were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon, the king of Heshbon, and to Og, the king of Bashan, and to Ashtaroth. Wherefore our elders and all the inhabitants of our country spoke to us, saying, take provisions with you for your journey, and go out to meet them and say unto them, we are your servants. Therefore now make a league with us. So they sent, now again, keep in mind, they were trying to make Joshua think that they had traveled for hundreds of miles, right? To make a league with him or agreement. And then look what they do. Look what they do in verse 12. This our bread, which we took hot for our provision out of our houses on the day we came forth to go out to you. And behold, it is dry and moldy. They said, look at this bread, man, that we baked hot. And we traveled all these miles, right? And as we traveled, the bread got stale and it got moldy. And look at this. And these skins of wine, which we filled with new, and behold, they are torn. And these are garments, and our shoes have become old by reason of a long journey. So they're trying to psych Joshua out. They're trying to make Joshua believe that they came a long way. But notice, if you have your notes, the gray box. The Gibeonites were a group of Canaanite people who lived in the city of Gibeon, along with nearby cities of Chepariah, Beeroth, and Kirjath Jearim. They claim to have traveled hundreds of miles because of the fame of Israel's God. Watch this now. Watch this. Yet they lived less than a day's journey. As a matter of fact, I looked it up, and most commentators said they traveled 20 to 25 miles to go meet Israel in the camp. But look what Joshua does. He accepted the appearance of old clothes, worn out sandals, cracked wineskins, and moldy bread without asking God if the story was true. So here they were deceived. And like I said, next week, I'm going to do a whole Bible study on deception, because a lot of God's people are being deceived. So what's the snapshot focus here? The snapshot focus is this. The enemy's greatest weapon is not always force, it's deception. Right? They couldn't beat Joshua. They knew they couldn't stand up against Joshua. They knew that they couldn't come against him by force. And so what did they do? They used deception. And that goes back up to my introduction. Remember I said in the introduction, Satan knows that if he cannot defeat us through force, he will often try by deception. And I will say that's probably his main weapon today, is that he's deceiving a lot of people. A lot, and sad to say, even a lot of Christians. Let's move from the deception they encountered to the discernment they neglected. The discernment they neglected. Look at verse 14. And I've read this verse about 3 times already. So let me read it again. All right. Let me just back up and read verse 13 again. And these skins of wine, which we filled, were new, and behold, they are torn, and these are garments, and our shoes have become old by reason of the very long journey. We traveled a long way. That's why our bread got moldy. That's why our shoes got worn out. That's why our wine pouches busted open. Because, man, we've been on the road, Jack. We're like Ray Charles. Hit the road, Jack. That we hit the road. And we've been on the road. All right. And the men took of their provisions and asked not counsel at the mouth of the Lord. They just accepted what they said for face value. The discernment they neglected. Joshua and the leaders carefully examined. They looked at all the, oh man, whoa, whoa. They looked at all the evidence. They looked at the bread. They looked at the shoes. They looked at the clothes. They looked at the wineskins. They examined all the evidence. But failed to seek God's direction. Their mistake was not a lack of investigation, but a lack of prayer. They relied on human observation instead of divine revelation. As a result, they made a decision based on appearances rather than the counsel of the Lord. The snapshot focus. Human wisdom is never a substitute for God's guidance. So let me back up. One of our questions was what? If you look at the screen, have you ever confused common sense with God's guidance? Common sense said what? That these people travel from a long distance. Common sense said that. But that was not God's guidance. The snapshot focus, again, human wisdom is never a substitute for God's guidance. Next, they made the decision. Verse 15. They made the decision. And Joshua made peace with them and made a league with them and let them live. And the princes of the congregation swore unto them. You know, Joshua and the princes swore that they would not destroy them, but made a league with them. Joshua and the Israel leaders made a covenant of peace with the Gibeonites before discovering the truth about who they were. Joshua's failure was not one of rebellion against God, but neglecting to seek God's counsel, reminding us that even godly people can make costly decisions when they act without prayer. The snapshot focus. Good people can make bad decisions when they fail to seek God's guidance. Good people on this Zoom Bible study, but I'm going to say that y'all all are good people. And I'll even go one step further than that. And I'll say that all of you are godly people. I hope so. And yet and still, you can make bad decisions when you do it without seeking God. The next point, the discovery they experienced, verses 16 through 18. The discovery they experienced. Follow along with me if you have your Bible, verses 16 through 18. And it came to pass at the end of 3 days. 1, 2, 3. 3. Uno, dos, tres. 3. At the end of 3 days, after they made a league with them, that they heard that they were their Woo! They heard that they were their neighbors. Now remember, in the little gray box that I put in there, they were only about 20 to 25 miles away. But yet and still, they convinced Joshua that they had traveled hundreds of miles and that they dwelt among them. And the children of Israel journeyed and came into their cities on the 3rd day. Now their cities were Gibeon, Chephariah, Beeroth, and Kiriath Jearim. And the children of Israel smote them. Everybody else, what did they do to the city of Jericho? Destroyed it. What did they do to the city of Ai? Destroyed it. But they came to Gibeon and the related cities. And verse 18, and the children of Israel smote them not. because the princes of the congregation had sworn unto them by the Lord God of Israel, and all the congregation murmured against the princes. 3 days they made this covenant. They discovered that the Gibeonites were not distant travelers, but close neighbors. The deception was exposed, and the people murmured against Joshua and the leaders because they realized a serious mistake had been made. Joshua learned a painful lesson. He learned a painful lesson. And what is that? Appearances can be convincing, but they are not always truthful. What seemed wise according to human judgment proved to be a costly error because it had not been first submitted to God's guidance. So what's the snapshot focus here? Deception may succeed for a season, but the truth will eventually prevail. The truth will come out. And so they tried to hide it. The Gibeonites tried to hide it, but it came out. And they knew it was going to come out. They knew that they were only 20 to 25 miles away, and that in 3 days, Joshua was going to find out. But because Joshua made this league with them, that he was not going to destroy them, that they knew they were safe. They knew they were safe. So we see the deception they encountered, the discernment they neglected, the decision they made, the discovery they experienced, and now the dilemma they faced in verses 19 through 21. But all the princes said unto all the congregation, we have sworn unto them by the Lord God of Israel. Now, therefore, we may not touch them. We can't do anything to them. This we will do to them. We will let them live, lest wrath be upon us because of the oath which we swore unto them. What was the oath? The oath was we made a peace treaty with you, that we are not going to destroy you. We are not going to wipe you out. That's the peace treaty that we made with the Gibeonites. And the princes said unto them, let them live, but let them be hewers of wood and drawers of water unto all the congregation, as the princes had promised them. So the dilemma that they faced, as we look at it, if they destroyed the Gibeonites, then they would break the covenant that they swore before the Lord, and this would damage their integrity and dishonor God's name. If they spared them, Israel would have to live with the long-term consequence of a treaty that should have never been made. Joshua's experience reminds us that prayerlessness can create a difficult choice after we do it. Prayerlessness. What's the snapshot focus? One bad decision creates many difficult decisions. Huh. Huh. One bad decision often creates many difficult decisions. Ooh, man, how many times have you visited Bad Decisionville? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That hurts, man. That hurts me to my heart, because I know that I've made bad decisions, and I've seen how it created many difficult decisions. Man, stew on that one. Ruminate on that one. And ask yourself, is it worth it? Was it worth it? Verse 14. Was it worth it? And ask not counsel at the mouth of the Lord. And ask not counsel at the mouth of the Lord. One bad decision creates many difficult decisions. Oh, man, let that one sink into your heart. And the last point, I'm not finished, but this is my last point, is the discipline they administered. If you look at your notes, Joshua honored the covenant he made with the Gibeonites, even though it had been obtained through deception, and assigned to them to serve as woodcutters and water carriers for the house of the Lord. Although Joshua made a costly mistake, God graciously redeemed the situation by giving the Gibeonites a place of service connected to the worship of Israel, reminding us that God's grace is greater than our failures and that he can bring good even out of poor decisions. Now, we don't want him to, we don't want to make poor decisions so that God can bring good out of it. But it is good to know that he brings good out of poor decisions. And so what is the snapshot focus? The snapshot focus. God can redeem our mistakes without removing their consequences. God can redeem our mistakes without removing their consequences. Look at this. Look at this right here. Do you know that every pilot has a checklist? Now just think, oh man, this is good, man. This is good. This is good. I'm telling you, this is good. Every time the pilot has to go through this checklist. Every time. He can't say, well, you know what? The sun is up. There's no clouds in the sky. Let's just go ahead and take off. Every pilot has a checklist. And so Joshua should have had a checklist. And on that checklist should have been one thing, and that was consult with God. Right? I just put this up here. There's a pre-flight checklist. Inspect the aircraft, check fuel levels, flight controls, oil, weather, navigation systems, and safety equipment before starting the journey. So let me ask you this question: how many? I was going to say by show of hands, but you don't have to raise your hand. You can raise your hand in your heart. So by a show of hands, how many people want to fly on a plane where the pilot doesn't have a checklist? But yet still, Pastor Glaze, you done stop preaching. You don't stop teaching and you gone to meddling. How many of us will make decisions and not have a checklist of things that we need to do? Before engine start checklist, verify brakes, fuel selector, electrical systems, and instruments. Before takeoff checklist, confirm flight controls, flaps, trim, engine instrumentals, doors, seat belts, runway clearance. Cruise checklist, monitor fuel, engine performance, navigation, and weather. Before landing, check landing gear, flaps, airspeed, fuel, and landing clearance. Shutdown checklist, secure the aircraft after landing. Now, how many of you want to fly on a plane where the pilot does not have a checklist, or if he does have a check, he's not checking it? You know what? We don't know what all these pilots do. We just accept that that's what they're doing. that they're going through. And maybe you never thought about this, that when you get on a plane, these are all the things that that pilot is doing. And like I said, what the pilot got, cocky and just said, well, you know what? I'm cool. Everything is cool. Let's just take this plane off and let's just get to where we're going. No, man, I don't care how late that this plane is. I don't care how confident the pilot is. Man, you better go through the checklist. So let me just close with this checklist for you as a Christian. The word check. Before you check out, make sure you check up. C, consult God in prayer. H, hear God's word. E, examine your motives. C, consider the consequences. And K, keep Christ first. That's your checklist for making decisions so that you are not deceived. All right. Okay. Questions? Comments? Snide remarks? Questions?